I got the termination email while breastfeeding my daughter at 2 a.m. The reason? Corporate restructuring, but I was the only one being restructured. 3 months later. I walked back into that same building wearing my best suit, but I wasn't there for work. I came with a copy of my contract, some secretly recorded conversations, and a team of federal auditors who were very interested in the $6.2 million that had mysteriously vanished from their grants. My name is Alyssa Greer, and 8 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. At 34, I was a senior finance specialist at Hopewell Equity Initiative, a nonprofit in Richmond that secured federal grants for underserved communities. The irony of what happened next still tastes bitter in my mouth. I'd worked there for 6 years, climbing from junior analyst to managing a portfolio worth millions in federal funding. My desk overlooked the James River, and on clear mornings, I'd arrive early just to watch the sunrise paint the water gold while I reviewed grant proposals. I was good at my job, really good. Good enough that Karen Blaylock, my direct supervisor, had started making those little comments that successful women recognize all too well. Must be nice to have all that energy, she'd say when I'd streamline a process that had been broken for years. Or my personal favorite, some of us prioritize family over career. This from a woman whose idea of family time was FaceTiming her daughter's nanny. Karen was in her late 40s, always impeccably dressed in theory but somehow missing the mark. Like she'd learned about style from a manual rather than developing her own. She had this habit of touching her pearl necklace when she felt threatened, which happened whenever I spoke up in meetings. The pearls got a real workout the day I caught a $400,000 error in our quarterly federal report. But I'd learned to navigate around her insecurities. I CC'd her on everything, let her take credit for my wins, played the game. I had bigger things to focus on, like the baby growing inside me and the life I was building with my husband, Marcus. The pregnancy announcement had gone about as well as expected. Karen's face had done this fascinating journey from shock to calculation to fake enthusiasm, all in about 3 seconds. "How wonderful for you," she'd said, those pearls practically vibrating. "Though the timing is interesting, given our upcoming federal audit." That audit, looking back, that should have been my first real warning sign. Karen had been unusually interested in my maternity leave dates, specifically about my system access and signature authorities. She'd even suggested I sign some preliminary documents before I left, just in case we need them while you're gone. "That's not really protocol," I'd pointed out. "Well, we're not really a protocol kind of place, are we?" She'd laughed, but her eyes stayed cold. The week before my leave, things got stranger. Budget meetings I'd always attended were suddenly rescheduled to after my departure. Files I'd managed for years were temporarily reassigned for streamlining purposes. And then there was the promotion, Karen's sudden elevation to Director of Federal Funding, announced at my goodbye party like some kind of twisted gift. "You'll report to me when you return," she'd said, raising her sparkling cider in a mock toast. "If you return." That last part was whispered, but I heard it. I'd pushed down the unease, told myself I was being paranoid. Pregnancy hormones, pre-leave anxiety, whatever. I had a solid contract, federal protections under FMLA, and 6 years of stellar performance reviews. What could go wrong? Marcus drove me home that last day. My box of personal items in the back seat. Photos, my favorite coffee mug. The small succulent that had somehow survived the fluorescent office lighting. "You okay?" he'd asked, noticing my silence. "Just thinking," I'd said, watching the building shrink in the side mirror. Karen seemed almost happy to see me go. "Karen's always been threatened by you," Marcus had replied. 12 weeks without you reminding everyone what competence looks like? It's probably her Christmas and birthday rolled into one. We'd laughed about it then. God, we'd actually laughed. Those first weeks of maternity leave were a blur of feedings and diapers and that peculiar exhaustion that comes from being needed 24 hours a day. I'd occasionally check my work email, more out of habit than necessity, watching the threads continue without me. Normal stuff mostly, grant deadlines, report submissions, The usual nonprofit scramble for funding. But there were oddities. Expenses approved without the usual documentation. New vendors I didn't recognize. Budget lines that didn't quite add up. I'd started a file on my personal laptop, telling myself I'd flag it when I returned. When I returned, because of course I was going to return. That's what the law said. That's what my contract guaranteed. That's what decent human beings did. They held your job while you recovered from creating life. I should have known better. Should have recognized that in Karen's world, decent human beings were just obstacles to be restructured. The email arrived at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I was sitting in the nursery. Maya latched onto my breast, her tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb. The notification lit up my phone on the side table, and I almost ignored it. Who sends work emails at this hour? Subject: Organizational restructuring. Action required. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. You know that feeling when your body understands bad news before your brain catches up? That primal alarm that says, run even when you're sitting still? Dear Ms. Greer, we regret to inform you that due to necessary organizational restructuring, your position has been eliminated effective immediately. This decision is part of a broader cost reduction initiative and is in no way a reflection of your performance. Your final paycheck, including unused vacation time, will be processed within 30 days. Please coordinate with HR regarding the return of any company property. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Human Resources, Hopewell Equity Initiative. I read it 3 times. Maya still nursing peacefully, oblivious to the fact that our health insurance had just evaporated. No warning, no discussion, no transition plan. Just a form letter sent in the dead of night like a coward's whisper. My hands shook as I forwarded it to Marcus, typing with one thumb. They fired me. His response was immediate. He must have been lying awake in bed. What? I called HR at 8 a.m. sharp. Patricia answered, her voice artificially bright. Oh, Alyssa. Yes, I'm so sorry about this. Budget cuts, you understand. I'm on federally protected maternity leave, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Maya was crying in the background, probably sensing my distress. Yes. Well, the restructuring affects multiple positions. Patricia said carefully. Too carefully. Like she was reading from a script. Which other positions? A pause. I'm not at liberty to discuss other personnel matters. Patricia, we both know this is illegal. I'm sorry you feel that way. If you have concerns, you're welcome to address them through the appropriate channels. Now, about returning your laptop. I hung up. The next few hours were a blur of frantic research and phone calls. FMLA violations, wrongful termination, legal protections. I knew the law, had made sure of it before I'd gotten pregnant. You can't fire someone on maternity leave unless you're eliminating their position entirely and can prove it's part of a larger layoff. But when I logged into LinkedIn later that morning, my blood turned to ice. There it was, posted just 6 hours after my termination. Hopewell Equity Initiative seeking senior finance specialist. Required experience, 5-7 years in nonprofit financial management. The exact description of my job, down to the same typing test requirements. They weren't eliminating my position. They were eliminating me. Marcus came home from work early, finding me at the kitchen table surrounded by printed emails and legal websites. Maya slept in her bouncer beside me, blissfully unaware that her college fund had just become our emergency fund. We'll sue them, he said immediately. This is textbook discrimination. But I was looking at something else, my final email threads before leave, the ones about those strange expenses, on a hunch. I logged into my personal backup drive where I'd been storing copies of concerning documents. Thank God for my paranoid habit of backing everything up. Look at this, I said, pulling up a spreadsheet. 3 weeks before my leave, Karen approved $200,000 in consulting fees to a company called Riverside Solutions. I've never heard of them. They're not in our vendor database. So I did some digging. Riverside Solutions was incorporated 2 days before that payment. The registered agent, Karen's brother-in-law. Marcus whistled low. That's fraud. That's federal grant fraud. I pulled up another document. And here, look at this approval signature. He leaned in, squinting at the screen. That's your signature. Dated 2 weeks after Maya was born. When I was recovering from a C-section and hadn't logged into anything work-related. My mind was racing now, connecting dots I'd been too trusting to see before. She didn't fire me because she doesn't like me. She fired me because I know too much. Because when I come back, I'd see what she's been doing. Holy shit, Alyssa. Maya stirred, making those little newborn grunts that preceded crying. I picked her up, feeling the weight of her, 7 pounds of perfect innocence who deserved better than a mother who'd been too naive to protect their future. They picked the wrong person to screw over, I whispered into her soft hair. The postpartum hormones that had been dragging me toward depression suddenly had a new target. Not sadness, rage. Pure, crystalline rage. Karen Blaylock thought she could use my maternity leave as cover for her crimes. She thought a new mother would be too exhausted, too overwhelmed, too scared to fight back. She thought wrong. I shifted Maya to one arm and pulled my laptop closer with the other. How do you report federal grant fraud? I typed into Google, the search results loading like ammunition. They'd taken my job, my income, my security, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd left me with time, evidence, and nothing left to lose. The first rule of whistleblowing is simple: document everything. The second rule? Trust no one still on the inside. I learned both the hard way. My initial call to Jamie in accounting seemed safe enough. We'd shared lunch countless times, complained about Karen's micromanaging together. Surely she'd noticed the irregularities too. Alyssa, how's the baby? Her voice was warm but guarded. She's perfect. Listen, Jamie, I need to ask you something. Those Riverside Solutions invoices. I can't talk about this. The warmth vanished instantly. I'm sorry about what happened, but I need this job. Click. But that brief conversation told me everything. Jamie knew. They all knew something was wrong, but fear kept them silent. I needed another approach. I spent the next 3 weeks building my case like I was preparing for a federal audit. Because, essentially, I was. Every feeding session became a research session. My laptop balanced precariously while Maya nursed. I cross-referenced every suspicious transaction against federal grant guidelines, traced shell companies through state and corporation records, mapped the money flow. The pattern was elegant in its corruption. Karen had created a network of fake vendors, each incorporated in different states, all leading back to people in her orbit. Riverside Solutions was just the tip. There was Piedmont Consulting, registered to her cousin, James River Analytics, her college roommate, and at least 4 others. Over 3 years, they'd siphoned off millions meant for community programs. But the forged signatures, that was her fatal mistake. I'd found 17 documents bearing my electronic signature during my leave. Grant modifications, budget reallocations, vendor approvals. The metadata showed they'd been signed from Karen's computer, using her login credentials. She'd gotten sloppy, probably assuming I'd never return to check. My breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Tom Winters, a janitor who'd worked nights at Hopewell for 15 years, reached out through Facebook. Saw you had your baby. Also heard what they did? That ain't right. His message was simple, but I sensed something more. We met at a Starbucks in Carytown, Maya sleeping in her carrier while Tom nervously shredded a napkin. I probably shouldn't be here, he started. But what they did to you? My daughter's about your age. If someone did that to her... He shook his head. You were always kind. Remembered my name, asked about my grandkids. Not like some others. Tom, do you know something? He glanced around, then pulled out his phone. I take pictures sometimes. Building management wants documentation of any messes or damages I find. He scrolled through photos. But sometimes I photograph other things. Like when I find shredded documents that someone was too lazy to run through the crosscut shredder. My heart raced as he showed me image after image. Partially destroyed invoices, emails, bank statements, all related to the fake vendors. Karen had been destroying evidence, but Tom had unknowingly been preserving it. Can you send me these? Already did. Created a new email just for it. He stood to leave, then paused. Ms. Blaylock, she's been working real late lately. Nervous-like, shredding a lot more than usual. She knew I was on to her. Good. That night, I organized everything into a comprehensive package. Financial records, forged documents, Tom's photos, email trails, incorporation records, 63 pages of evidence that painted a clear picture of systematic fraud. But I needed one more thing. I called my friend Sarah, who still worked in IT at Hopewell. She picked up on the first ring. I've been wondering when you'd call, she said without preamble. I can't access anything for you. They're monitoring everything now. I don't need you to access anything. I just need to know. Are they still using the same email server backup system? A pause. Why? Because if they are, then every email Karen deleted still exists in the cloud backup for 90 days. Alyssa? Sarah's voice dropped. What are you planning? Justice. Sarah, she stole money meant for kids' after-school programs, for elderly meal deliveries, for addiction recovery services, and she used my name to do it. Another long pause. Then, yes. Same system. And for what it's worth, procurement just posted 3 more positions in finance. Seems like they're building a whole new team. Karen's team. After we hung up, I sat in the dark nursery, Maya finally sleeping in her crib. The mobile above her bed cast star shapes on the ceiling, spinning slowly in the draft from the air vent. Innocent patterns in the darkness. I opened my laptop one more time and navigated to the U.S. Office of Inspector General website. The complaint form seemed almost anticlimactic. Just boxes to fill, documents to attach, but each keystroke felt like loading a weapon. Complaint type, grant fraud. Estimated loss, $6.2 million. Supporting documentation. Attached, 63 pages. Before I hit submit, I looked at Maya. She deserved a world where people faced consequences for their actions, where mothers weren't discarded like broken equipment, where stealing from the vulnerable came with a price. I clicked submit at 3:42 a.m., almost exactly 1 month after that termination email. The confirmation number appeared instantly. OIG 2024-7782. Your move, Karen, I whispered to the darkness. The game was officially on. A good revenge is like a chess game. You need to think 6 moves ahead and protect your queen. I had my OIG complaint, but that was just the opening gambit. Federal investigations take time, and I needed multiple pressure points. My lawyer, Diane Mercado, was a small woman with the demeanor of a friendly librarian and the legal instincts of a shark. She specialized in employment law and whistleblower protections, and her eyes lit up when she reviewed my documentation. They violated FMLA, created a hostile work environment, and potentially retaliated against a whistleblower, she said, adjusting her reading glasses. That's the trifecta of stupid. But this fraud element, that elevates everything, can we use it in the wrongful termination suit? Not directly. The fraud investigation needs to remain separate. But, she smiled. We can certainly note that you were terminated shortly after raising concerns about financial irregularities. Let them connect their own dots. We filed the FMLA lawsuit 2 weeks later, seeking reinstatement, back pay, and damages. But that was just the visible attack. The real strategy was more complex. I created a detailed timeline showing how my termination coincided with the escalation of fraudulent activities. Then I sent anonymous packages to 3 different entities: the Virginia Attorney General's Office, the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division, and the Department of Justice's Grant Fraud Unit. Each package was slightly different, tailored to their specific jurisdictions, but all pointed to the same conclusion. Hopewell was dirty, and Karen Blaylock was the ringleader. But my masterstroke came from studying Karen herself. She was vain, desperate to maintain her image in Richmond's nonprofit community. So I reached out to Martin Zhao, an investigative journalist at the Richmond Ledger who specialized in nonprofit malfeasance. I can't reveal my source, I told him over encrypted phone. But I have documents showing major fraud at Hopewell Equity Initiative, federal grants meant for underserved communities being diverted to fake vendors. We're talking millions. Can you prove it? Check the state incorporation records. Look for companies created right before large payments. Cross-reference the registered agents with Hopewell's leadership team. And what do you get out of this? Justice, and maybe a front-row seat to watch it all burn down. Martin took the bait. Within a week, he'd started making calls to Hopewell for comment. I heard about it from Sarah, who texted me. Reporter sniffing around, Karen's freaking out, mandatory all-staff meeting tomorrow about media relations. Meanwhile, I played the wronged mother perfectly. Posted on LinkedIn about the challenges of job hunting while caring for a newborn. Shared articles about FMLA violations. Built a narrative that would make Hopewell's actions look even worse when the truth came out. The first crack came 3 weeks later. Patricia from HR called, her voice artificially sweet. Alyssa, I hope you're well. We've been reviewing your termination and think there might have been some miscommunication. Miscommunication? You fired me on maternity leave. Yes. Well, we'd like to discuss a potential resolution. Perhaps a severance package with a standard non-disclosure agreement? I almost laughed. They were trying to buy my silence, not knowing I'd already lit multiple fuses. I'll need to discuss any offers with my attorney, I said calmly. Speaking of which, have you received the discovery request yet? The pause told me everything. Discovery requests? For the lawsuit, my attorney says we'll need all emails related to my termination, the restructuring plan, financial records showing the supposed budget crisis. Oh, and any documents I supposedly signed while on leave. Just routine stuff. I'll have to get back to you. She never did. But 2 days later, something better happened. Tom texted me a photo from the parking lot. Federal agents carrying boxes out of Hopewell's building. Started at 7 a.m., he wrote. They've been here all day. Ms. Blaylock tried to leave, but they turned her back. I was feeding Maya when the news broke online. Federal agents raid. Richmond nonprofit amid fraud allegations, read the headline. Martin's article was thorough, highlighting the shell companies, the suspicious timing, the millions in potentially misused funds. He didn't name me, but he noted that a recent wrongful termination lawsuit has raised questions about potential retaliation against employees who question financial practices. My phone exploded with texts from former colleagues. Jamie called, crying, apologizing for hanging up on me. Others shared stories of things they'd seen but been afraid to report. The dam was breaking, but I wasn't done. I compiled every personal document I had showing Karen's signature, performance reviews, expense approvals, official letters. Then I had a forensic document examiner compare them to the signatures on the fraudulent documents. His report was damning. The questioned signatures show clear evidence of digital manipulation and do not match the known exemplars. This report went to the U.S. Attorney's Office with a cover letter stating I was concerned about identity theft and fraud committed using my professional credentials. If they were going to use my name to steal federal money, I was going to make sure everyone knew I was a victim, not an accomplice. Marcus watched me work one evening, Maya asleep between us on the couch. You're really going for the throat, he observed. She tried to destroy us, I replied, not looking up from my laptop. She thought I'd be too overwhelmed with a newborn to fight back. She counted on me being weak. Instead, she gave you motivation and time. Exactly. New mothers don't sleep much anyway. Might as well use those 3 a.m. hours productively. By the time the formal federal investigation was announced, I had helped create a perfect storm. Multiple agencies investigating, media attention focused, civil lawsuit pending, and a paper trail that led straight to Karen's door. She'd wanted me gone to cover her crimes. Instead, my absence had given me the distance and determination to expose them all. The house of cards was starting to fall. And I had a front row seat to watch it collapse. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The morning of the raid was just the beginning. Over the next 3 weeks, Hopewell Equity Initiative transformed from a respected nonprofit into a case study in corruption. Federal investigators set up a temporary office in their conference room, the same room where Karen had announced her promotion at my farewell party. Sarah kept me updated through careful texts. They're interviewing everyone. Some people are crying. Board members showing up looking pale. Then, the one that made me smile. Karen's office is sealed with tape, like a crime scene. Because it was a crime scene. The Richmond Ledger published daily updates. Martin Zhao had become Hopewell's unofficial chronicler of doom, each article more damning than the last. The investigation had uncovered not just the $6.2 million in fraudulent vendor payments, but another $3 million in misallocated funds. Grant money meant for youth programs had been spent on administrative costs, including first-class flights and luxury retreats for senior management. But it was the forged signatures that elevated this from financial fraud to identity theft and wire fraud. Federal crimes with federal consequences. I heard through the nonprofit grapevine that Karen had hired Gerald Morrison, Richmond's most expensive white-collar defense attorney. That told me everything about how serious this had become. You don't hire Morrison unless you're looking at real prison time. The call from the U.S. Attorney's Office came on a Thursday afternoon. Maya was napping, and I'd actually been doing something normal, folding laundry, when the phone rang. Ms. Greer, this is Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh. We'd like to discuss your complaint and subsequent evidence submission. My heart raced. Of course. Can you come to our offices tomorrow? We'll need several hours. You can bring your attorney if you'd like. I'll be there. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from Maya's feeding schedule, but from anticipation. Tomorrow, I would walk into a federal building and help nail the coffin shut on Karen Blaylock's career, and likely her freedom. The interview lasted 6 hours. 3 attorneys, 2 FBI agents, and a forensic accountant picked through every detail. They had already confirmed most of what I'd provided, but they needed context, history, patterns of behavior. When did you first notice irregularities? Jennifer Walsh asked. About 6 months before my maternity leave. Small things at first, invoices that didn't match our standard format, vendors I didn't recognize. Did you report these concerns? I mentioned them to Karen. She said she was handling a special federal project that required discretion. The FBI agent leaned forward. Did you believe her? I wanted to. But I started keeping copies of everything, just in case. They showed me documents I hadn't seen before, emails between Karen and her conspirators, bank records showing money flowing from Hopewell to the shell companies and then to personal accounts. The scope was breathtaking. Your forged signatures appear on 17 documents. The forensic accountant said, the total value of transactions authorized with your forged signature exceeds $2.8 million. I felt sick. My professional reputation, my credentials, used to steal money from the people who needed it most. We'll need you to testify before a grand jury, Jennifer Walsh said. Are you willing to do that? Absolutely. As I left the federal building, my phone buzzed. An unknown number had sent a text. You destroyed everything. I hope you're happy. I knew it was Karen, probably using a burner phone. I screenshotted it and forwarded it to Jennifer Walsh with a note. FYI, just received this. Her response was immediate. Thank you. Please do not respond or delete the original. 2 days later, the arrests began. Karen was first, taken into custody at her home at 6 a.m. The news channels had footage of her being led out in handcuffs, still in her silk pajamas, trying to hide her face from the cameras. The mighty director of federal funding, reduced to a perp walk. 4 others were arrested that morning, her brother-in-law, her cousin, and 2 former Hopewell employees who had left to run the shell companies. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, conspiracy to commit grant fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. Hopewell's board called an emergency meeting and announced a complete leadership change. The CEO resigned to accept responsibility for the oversight failures. The entire finance department was suspended pending investigation. Federal monitors were appointed to oversee all grant activities. Jamie called me that afternoon, her voice a mix of awe and guilt. "Alyssa, I'm so sorry. We all knew something was wrong, but we were scared. You were the only one brave enough to do something." "I wasn't brave," I told her honestly. "I was angry. There's a difference." The criminal case moved faster than my civil lawsuit. Within 2 months, Karen's co-conspirators had started taking plea deals, each one providing more evidence against her. The brother-in-law admitted to receiving $1.8 million for doing nothing. The cousin detailed how Karen had coached them on creating fake invoices. Karen held out, maintaining her innocence, claiming she was a scapegoat for institutional failures. But the evidence was overwhelming. Mai testified before the grand jury, calmly presenting the timeline, the forged documents, the pattern of retaliation when I'd started asking questions. "She didn't just steal money," I told them. "She stole trust. Every dollar she took was meant for someone in need, a kid who wouldn't get after-school tutoring, a senior who'd miss a meal, an addict who couldn't access treatment. She fired me to cover up these thefts, but firing me was the least of her crimes." The indictment came down 2 weeks later, 47 criminal counts. The press had a field day. Nonprofit nightmare. Director faces decades in prison for grant fraud scheme. Karen's mugshot became the face of nonprofit corruption. Through it all, I kept my routine. Feeding Maya, changing diapers, playing peekaboo, normal mother things, while in the background. An organization burned and a woman's life crumbled. The duality should have felt strange, but it didn't. This was justice, served cold and precisely, one federal charge at a time. The day I returned to Hopewell's building, the November air bit sharp against my face. 6 months had passed since that 2 a.m. termination email. Maya was with Marcus's mother, probably napping after her morning bottle. I wore my best suit, the charcoal one I'd bought for important presentations, now serving a different purpose. The security guard did a double take when I signed in. "Ms. Greer, I thought you were—" "I'm here as a witness," I said calmly, accepting my visitor badge. Conference room 3. The hallways felt smaller than I remembered, or maybe I felt bigger. The abstract art on the walls, the motivational posters about making a difference, all of it seemed like props in a play about corporate virtue. Jennifer Walsh met me outside the conference room. "Ready?" "I've been ready for months." Inside, federal investigators had transformed the space into a makeshift courtroom. Boxes of evidence lined one wall. A court reporter sat ready. And there, at the far end of the table, sat Karen Blaylock with her attorney. She looked different. The perfect corporate armor was gone. No pearls, no power suit, just a simple gray dress and the hollow eyes of someone who'd lost everything. When she saw me, her face cycled through emotions: surprise, anger, and finally, something like fear. "Ms. Greer," the lead investigator began. "We're conducting a formal deposition regarding the identity theft charges. You understand you're under oath?" "I do." For the next 4 hours, I methodically destroyed what was left of Karen's defense. I presented original documents, explained our signature protocols, demonstrated how I couldn't have possibly signed documents while recovering from surgery. The forensic evidence supported every word, but my testimony added the human element, the betrayal, the violation of trust. "Ms. Blaylock's attorney suggested you might have given her verbal permission to sign on your behalf," Jennifer Walsh said. I almost laughed. I was on federally protected leave, heavily medicated from a C-section, and caring for a newborn. Even if I'd wanted to, which I didn't, I was in no condition to authorize federal grant modifications. Karen's attorney tried to rattle me during cross-examination. Isn't it true you were planning to leave Hopewell anyway? No. When, but you'd been documenting supposed irregularities. That suggests you were unhappy. I was doing my job. Part of that job was ensuring federal compliance. When I saw concerning patterns, I documented them. That's not unhappiness, that's diligence. And yet you were fired. Illegally terminated while on protected leave, I corrected, which is why we're also in civil proceedings. The most satisfying moment came when they presented the forged documents. One by one, I identified the fraudulent signatures, explaining how they differed from my authentic ones. The slant of certain letters, the pressure points, the digital artifacts that showed manipulation. Could you explain this document? The investigator slid a paper across the table. I studied it, a grant modification moving $400,000 to Riverside Solutions, dated 3 weeks after Maya's birth. This signature is forged. See the Y in my last name? I have a distinctive loop that's missing here. Also, the metadata shows this was signed from Karen's workstation using her credentials. Karen shifted in her seat. Her attorney whispered urgently in her ear. Furthermore, I continued. This modification violates federal guidelines. You can't reallocate more than 10% of grant funds without prior approval. This represents nearly 40% of that grant. I would never have signed this, even if I'd been working. The investigation had revealed Karen's sloppiness in her panic to cover tracks. She'd been so focused on getting me out that she'd made amateur mistakes. Using her own login, signing documents from her IP address, creating vendor companies with obvious connections to her family. One last question, Jennifer Walsh said. Do you believe Ms. Blaylock targeted you specifically because of your knowledge of these transactions? I looked directly at Karen for the first time. She couldn't meet my eyes. Yes, I was the senior finance specialist. I knew our grants inside and out. I'd already started questioning expenses. She needed me gone to continue her scheme. And my maternity leave provided the perfect opportunity. She thought a new mother would be too overwhelmed to fight back. Were you too overwhelmed? No, I was motivated. As the deposition concluded, Karen's attorney made one last attempt. My client would like to make a statement. Karen stood, hands shaking slightly. Alyssa, No. I interrupted. You don't get to apologize now. You fired me while I was feeding my infant daughter. You stole money meant for vulnerable populations. You committed crimes using my name. Save your statement for the judge. I gathered my documents and left without looking back. In the elevator, Jennifer Walsh smiled grimly. That was devastating. In a good way. She taught me well, I replied. Always document everything. Outside, Richmond's skyline stretched before me, the James River glinting in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in this city, kids were in after-school programs, seniors were getting meals, people were getting help, all from grants that would now be properly managed. My phone buzzed. Marcus had sent a photo of Maya, grinning toothlessly at the camera. Someone just rolled over by herself. I smiled, typing back, Mommy's little fighter. On my way home. The call came that evening. Jennifer Walsh sounded tired but satisfied. Karen's attorney just called. She wants to change her plea to guilty. Your testimony made it clear she can't win at trial. All counts? She's negotiating, but it'll be substantial. She's looking at 8 to 12 years minimum. I hung up and picked up Maya, who was babbling happily in her bouncer. Mommy won, I whispered into her soft hair. The bad lady is going away for a long time. Justice doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives in a phone call on a quiet Tuesday evening while your baby plays with her toes and your husband makes dinner. But it's still justice. And it's still sweet. The news alert popped up on my phone at 9:47 p.m., 3 months after that deposition. I was in Maya's room, reading Goodnight Moon for the third time because she'd discovered the joy of repetition. Marcus had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from his shift at the hospital. Former nonprofit director Karen Blaylock sentenced to 11 years in federal fraud case. I clicked the link. Maya grabbing at my phone with curious fingers. The article included a photo from the sentencing, Karen in an orange jumpsuit, no trace of the polished executive who'd once worn pearls like armor. Blaylock received a 132 months in federal prison after pleading guilty to 23 counts including wire fraud, grant fraud, and aggravated identity theft. She was also ordered to pay $6.2 million in restitution. The identity theft charges had added years to her sentence. Using my signature hadn't just been fraud, it was a federal offense that carried mandatory minimums. The judge called it a betrayal of public trust at every level. I scrolled through the article, finding a quote from the prosecutor. This case sends a clear message that those who steal from federal programs meant to help vulnerable populations will face serious consequences. My civil case had settled 2 weeks earlier. Hopewell, desperate to stop the bleeding, offered a substantial settlement, back pay, damages, and a glowing letter of recommendation that carefully omitted why I'd left. My attorney had pushed for more, but I was done. The money would secure Maya's college fund and give us breathing room. That was enough. I never returned to Hopewell. The entire organization had been gutted and rebuilt. But some stains don't wash out. Instead, I'd started consulting, helping other nonprofits strengthen their financial controls. Turns out, being a whistleblower who took down a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme looks impressive on a resume. Your mommy's a badass, Marcus had said one morning, reading a LinkedIn article someone had written about the case. Took down a giant, how one mother's maternity leave exposed a $6.2 million fraud. But sitting there with Maya, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger as she finally drifted off to sleep, I didn't feel like a giant slayer. I felt like what I was, a mother who'd been pushed too far and pushed back. I placed my phone on the nightstand and adjusted Maya's sleep sack. The stars from her mobile cast gentle shadows on the ceiling, the same shadows I'd watched while planning Karen's downfall during those sleepless nights. My phone buzzed again. Sarah had forwarded the article with a message. Saw the news. Still can't believe you did it. You saved Hopewell, even after they threw you away. I typed back, I didn't save anything. I just made sure the person who broke it paid the price. The next morning brought an unexpected call. The new CEO of Hopewell, brought in to clean up the mess. Wanted to meet. Not for a job, she assured me. But I'd like to understand what happened, how we failed you, and so many others. I agreed to coffee, partly out of curiosity. She was younger than Karen, with an earnestness that seemed genuine. We met at a shop downtown, Maya sleeping in her stroller beside me. I've read all the court documents, she said, but I wanted to hear from you. What could we have done differently? You could have listened, I said simply. I raised concerns. Others did too. But Karen had power. And in too many organizations, power speaks louder than truth. She nodded, taking notes. We're implementing new policies, anonymous reporting systems, mandatory rotation of financial approvals, external audits. What else? Protect your whistleblowers. Don't just say you will, actually do it. Because the next person might not be as stubborn as I was. We talked for an hour. She offered me a position, any position I wanted. I politely declined. Some bridges, once burned, provide better light than passage. That evening, I sat on our back porch while Maya played in her bouncer. The news had moved on to other scandals, other frauds, other falls from grace. Karen Blaylock was already yesterday's headline, starting her first full day in federal prison. I pulled up the photo Tom had sent me months ago. Federal agents carrying boxes from Hopewell's building. The beginning of the end. I'd saved it as a reminder. But looking at it now, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I deleted it. You ready for dinner? Marcus called from inside. Coming, I said, scooping up Maya. She gurgled happily, reaching for my face with drooly fingers. No idea that her mother had just won a war she never wanted to fight. No knowledge of federal investigations or forged signatures or the price of justice. That's okay, baby girl, I whispered, kissing her forehead. Mommy handled it. The last email I'd saved from Karen, sent the week before my maternity leave, had wished me well with hollow corporate pleasantry. Enjoy your time with your new arrival. Don't worry about us. We'll manage without you. She was half right. I did enjoy my time with Maya. Every sleepless night, every feeding, every diaper change, even the ones at 2 a.m. when termination emails arrived like thieves in the darkness. But she was wrong about managing without me. Dead wrong, 11 years in federal prison wrong. I looked at the evening star appearing in the darkening sky, Maya pointing at it with wonder. Somewhere, Karen was looking at the same star through prison bars. We'd both learned hard lessons about actions and consequences, about power and justice, about what happens when you underestimate a mother protecting her child's future. I didn't get back those months she stole. The stress, the fear, the postpartum depression made worse by financial terror. Those scars remain. But I got something better than restoration. I got retribution, legal, thorough, and complete. And sometimes, that's enough. I carried Maya inside, her weight familiar and comforting in my arms. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, new possibilities. But tonight, I was just a mother who'd won, holding her daughter close, finally able to rest. Justice had been served. The ledger was balanced. The story was over. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and revenge. I'm curious to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Did you think Alyssa went too far? Or did Karen get what she deserved? I'd love to hear your perspective. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed by someone who wronged you.